think that you will have made a difference for those people and hopefully help them to understand that's not how you see them. And that's not how they should see themselves. Everyone
Absolutely.
is a somebody. Everyone is intrinsically valuable and significant. And when we treat people like that, like as though that were the case, it becomes true for them too. It can become true
Absolutely.
for them too. And so I think, continuing to recognize people, however they show up, wherever the so-called chance encounters we have with them are, I mean, it's all significant. It all matters.
I agree. We're live. Welcome back, listeners, watchers. I'm just going to say it again. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Unbreakable Podcast Network. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be here with my soul sister and bestie, Dr. Ruth Mitchell. And Dr. Ruth Mitchell is joining us today from Australia. She is a Nobel Peace Prize-winning neurosurgeon. Listen, guys, I don't peck with the pigeons. I soar with the eagles. Hey, Ruth.
Hello, it's so good to see you, Kait. What a treat to have a chat with you today.
It's wonderful to have you. It's wonderful to have you. How's it down in Australia today?
Well, today is a beautiful sunny day. I have been for a run. I got all the way down to the harbour and was filled with gratitude for the day and the scenery. And I want to acknowledge that I live and work on unceded land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I think it's particularly important to remember whose land we're on and the fact that this land wasn't ceded. So when I go for a run, I tend to say a bunch of thank yous, and one is to the people who've kept this land for thousands of years. I also say thank you to my legs for carrying me and to my lungs for getting their air in and out. So yeah, so far it's been an excellent day, and it's just gotten better because now I get to talk to you.
It's wonderful. This is wonderful. And, I appreciate that in land acknowledgement. We do the same in land acknowledgements, of course, as you know, coming from Canada. And we are from Treaty 7. But right now, I am actually in Dallas, Texas. I am 4 days out from competition in this really not bougie at all, shitty Airbnb. So here we are.
I'm so excited for you and so proud of you. I've been kind of tracking your training and your progress, and I cannot be more impressed with your discipline and your hard work and your determination. It's so inspiring.
Thank you. Well, I feel the same way about you. I mean, marathon running. Talk to me a little bit about this race that you're preparing for.
So this is my first time running a marathon. It's on the 31st of August. It's the Sydney Marathon. And I'm actually running to raise money for the Children's Cancer Institute, which is like so dear to my heart because in my professional role, the pediatric side of my neurosurgery practice, I do work with a lot of kids with brain tumors. And what we've been able to do in the last few years, because of the work of the Children's Cancer Institute, is offer a whole nother level of sequencing for any kid who has a tumor. So any kid who has a tumor, any lump that comes out of anywhere, we can offer them extra sequencing, gives us a whole nother level of information about their tumor. And sometimes that opens up treatments for them that we wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. Perhaps a novel therapy or a chemo that would be used for something else in the past, but now we're like, oh, this pathway is disrupted in this tumor. And that's at no cost to the kids or their families. And so when I see the difference that this program has made, it's called 02. It's transformed the lives of a lot of my patients. And so I really wanted to raise awareness of that and the fact that, we can like work towards a world where kids don't die of cancer at all. That's the goal. And it's also just an opportunity to give back and say thank you to the scientists who are working so hard to make things better for these kids. So yeah, so that's that's my motivation, is to raise as much money as possible for the Children's Cancer Institute. But the other part of it is it keeps me, out of trouble. It keeps me moving. And I find that running is a wonderful mental health adjunct. We're just coming through winter here in Australia, and it's not like a cold, dark, miserable winter like what you might experience in the far north, but it is certainly less like sunlight hours and less good for how I feel, for my mood, I guess. And so I know that if I have to get out and run, it will help lift my spirits, even if it, hurts my legs. It's worth it.
Yes, it is. And I feel the same way. The training is like a lifeblood for me. I tell people all the time, bodybuilding saved my life. Like it really,
Right.
it gives you something to be grateful for. And it gives you something to work toward as well, in terms of just something greater than yourself.
Yeah. And it's nice to have something that's not just work. Like it feels like a part-time job, training for a marathon, but it's not about my patients. It's not about sick people. It's not about going to the hospital or planning an operation or thinking about my, my waiting list or any of that. And it's about taking care of my own health. And it's a really important counterpart to that.
I agree. It's one of those things, and this is actually why I wrote Unbreakable, right? I mean, it was one of those things where I needed something to focus on while I was competing. And it's not like I don't have enough on my plate, right? I have a full-time job. I've got a family. I've got, bodybuilding, and the competition is very consuming. Unbreakable became this aspect of something that I could pour myself into that didn't allow me to just get sucked into the competition, but also didn't allow me to just continue to stay sucked into work.
Yeah, sometimes you need that like third space, right?
I think so. And so, speaking of work, I think this is a really great opportunity for us to share how we met.
Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful to you, Kait. I've told so many people about the day that we met because it was a day on which I was feeling terrible. It was the day after my sister's funeral. My younger sister, Rhoda, passed away last October. She was 10 days short of her 41st birthday. And I got on that plane leaving Calgary feeling absolutely dreadful. I was sad. I was lonely. I was angry. And I found myself sitting down next to this amazing woman. And I remember what I overheard you say, Kait, when the flight attendant said, water or champagne? And you said, why not both? And I thought, yep, I'll have what she's having and I'm going to be friends with her. And it was like this lifeline. And for the next, 4.5 hours? I mean, I don't think we had a dull moment. Like,
no,
and I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your openness and your heart and your kindness, your empathy, and just your humor in that moment. It was so appreciated. It could not have been more timely. You arrived as an angel, truly.
Thank you. And the thing is, we didn't know. I didn't know anything about you. You sat down and we just started. But you were just as sarcastic and punchy as I was, right? And it's like I said one thing, and you were like, "Well, of course, this is how it's going to be." And it was as if we had known each other for our entire existence. And
I feel,
it was
partly because we both have this kind of, I don't know how you articulate it, but I think we both have this same kind of philosophy of how to communicate, which is a little bit what people who do improv talk about, where it's like,
yes,
you never shut down a proposition. You always say yes. You go, yes, and, and so you go with it. Oh, yeah, I see where I see where you're going with that. And I raise you this extra level, and we both do that. And so it was a very compatible communication style, particularly at that time when I really needed someone to match my complex energy. So it was superb.
Yes, and you learned something on that flight.
Did I ever? Now, it's funny. You never know what you're going to pick up. I have to tell you, actually, before I tell the good folks what I learned from you on that flight, I've been meaning to tell you something I learned from someone else on a plane recently, because it won't surprise you to know that I have continued to talk to strangers, since then. So I sat next to a retired fighter pilot on a plane, probably about a month ago, and he was fascinating, as you would imagine. And as we were about to take off, he sat up straight, he put his feet flat on the ground, and he tightened his seatbelt, and he just was in like a very fixed position. And I was like, getting ready for takeoff, pilot. And he said, the vast majority of accidents take off is when they occur. And so this is the time you want to be ready. And I went, listen, I normally go to sleep as the plane goes off, but look, this is an evidence-based approach. I see where you're coming from, sir. So I tightened my seatbelt too, so he wouldn't feel left out. But yeah, I was fascinated by that insight. I thought, even someone who's like an experienced pilot still takes that extra level of precaution of being alert but not alarmed as the plane takes off. So anyway, that wasn't as fun as what you taught me, not even close, which was, and I mean, it really is an age-old problem, is that you get onto a plane and you have this little like nugget of butter that is
Frozen.
minus 20 degrees. Like it's actually, it's so cold that it's like down at the point where Fahrenheit and Celsius cross over on the scale. Like it's that
Correct.
cold, right? It's like, dong, dong, dong. It's a hockey puck, I think. And it's never going to warm up. Like not this week, not next week. And so Kait said, look, stick with me. Let me show you how you warm this up. And there you picked up the little butter patty all wrapped up. And you said, you just pop it here between your thighs, because you know what? Thick thighs save lives. And I've always felt that, but I never knew exactly to what extent. And I've got to say, by the time it was time to spread that on the bread, it was just the right temperature. And
Perfect.
not only have I used this as like a personal policy now, a standard practice, I've also told quite a few people. So I've been spreading the word about the butter warmer. Yeah.
That's wonderful. See, and you just drop it into your lap, just right there between your thighs, and put your napkin back over top of it. And by the time you're ready to have your roll, there you go.
Or everyone can know, because why shouldn't they all know about this, right?
This is it. I mean, I about died when you did send me the picture of your full butter dish at home, though. When you were
which is a large,
I don't know.
a large like kind of glass butter dish. And, I put my butter in the fridge because I'm not home often enough to, use enough butter that can stay on the counter. But I did look at my butter dish and I was like, it would be nice to warm that up. I wonder if I could pop this between. No, I'm not doing it. But I did think about it. And so I did message you, because it was like, when someone comes to mind, you should let them know. That's my policy. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's a really good point. Is I'm the type of person where when somebody does come to my mind, I text them, and it couldn't be like, I mean, I don't know who, there were a couple people even just this week where I'm like, I have not thought of these people in forever. And then all of a sudden this woman just popped into my head. And so I sent her a message, and she said to me, hand to God, I thought about you this afternoon. And I was just like that. She goes, I just put it out into the universe. And then, of course, she said to me, her daughter actually grew up with my daughter, also a Ruth. And she says, I saw a girl who looked exactly like Ruthie with that big, beautiful, bright smile. And she goes, and that's why you popped into my head.
I love that. That's so great.
It's the small stuff. It's the small stuff,
but it's important,
right?
too, because, like there's never going to be a time when a friend won't benefit from knowing that they're like running around in someone else's mind. Like that's never not going to be a blessing. Like that's never going to be anything other than, a good thing, a beautiful thing, like an affirming thing, right? Why wouldn't we want to do that for each other?
Well, and I think that in this world, we are relatively disconnected. We're connected to the point where we're actually a little disconnected because we're distracted. We're not focusing on the things that matter. We're focusing on, celebrities, and we're focusing on news that isn't relevant, and we're focusing on the things that aren't going to make people better.
Right. Like it's not helpful. Like it's hilarious to me that I know that, for example, Lewis Hamilton, my favorite Formula One driver, is vegan. Do I know all my friends' dietary requirements? Not necessarily. It's like, that's fascinating, but I'm probably never going to be catering for him. Maybe, but you don't know. But the fact that my brain is filled up with information about, as you say, celebrities, people we're not who aren't in our purview, who aren't in our hearts, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Spending that little extra bit of that energy on the people that we love and care for. That's always a good idea.
I agree. It's interesting because while I've been in Dallas preparing for this show, it's my last couple of days before I step on the stage for the first time in 2 years. And we've been training at this, at some really great gyms. And one of them have had a lot of, pro athletes who have been there. And it's all well and fine. I have this dissonance to idolize people. They don't know who I am. They don't care who I am. I could say hi to them. I could comment on their shit on the internet. And none of them would even know who I was. let alone care about what I think, B, like I'm just another like in their little algorithm. And to me, it's like, okay, I would rather put my time into humans. And, I'll give you an example. So at the beginning of July, I was in Houston. And of course, I think it was Canada Day. And so it was just the Canada Day week. And I had to be down for Canada Day. So I observed July 4th as my statutory holiday, which is fine. But I had a Canada Day party at my office. And all of my colleagues told me it was the best Canada Day party they'd ever been to. Thank you.
Yeah, it was.
Also the only one. But
n equals 1, not the point. Do not ask the denominator. This is not relevant.
Exactly. It is completely relevant. But as we were there, you're out and you're about and stuff like this. And we had to go out for a business lunch. And so, of course, I have my my purse temperature Ziploc bag of chicken with me. I have all my own food because I'm on plan. And the people that we're with for lunch are just fascinated by this whole experience. They're like, okay, so tell me. And of course, I shred my chicken. And so everybody thinks it's ramen noodles. And I'm like, it is not. Like, what?
You're like, oh, God, I would love some ramen noodles right now. But that is not what this is.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get my green salad with nothing on it. No, I always order my salad as, just basically a bowl of lettuce. No fun. Just as simple as possible.
Like I want it naked. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And so they bring it over to me and I, take my purse temperature chicken out of my bag and I open it up and I'm just like, please don't stare. I mean, and I know it's weird. And so I empty my Ziploc bag and I, spread it around and then I salt and pepper it. And that's it. Right. And I'm good with that. I enjoy it. It tastes good. It nourishes my body. I know that it's doing and working toward my goals. Like it's for me, it's not a punishment. I do this because I choose to. And so, of course, everybody is having their, fish and whatever for lunch.
Things with sauce.
Oh, gosh, so much sauce. And so I go to the restroom and I'm coming back and people in Houston are very complimentary. Like they do not hold back from telling you if you look nice or something like that. Right.
How wonderful. What a wonderful trait.
I've noticed that a lot. And I don't know if it's just because of who I am as a person, because, I'll make eye contact and I say hi to people. I mean, it's just how I am. And so I'm coming back from the restroom and there's this young man and he's working there and he was part of the wait staff. And I think he was, a drink attendant or whatever they refer to them as. I don't know. He wasn't a server. I know that. And so he says to me, he goes, I just wanted to say you look very nice and I really like your arms. And I said, well, thank you very much. And I extend my hand out. I extend my hand out to him and I shake it. And he goes, well, do you have an Instagram account? And of course, that's how we communicate now is we don't hand out business cards anymore. We use LinkedIn and we use Instagram. And I said, yeah, of course. I said, if you follow me, I'll give you a follow back. Like, I'm not a huge poster. Like, I don't put a lot of stuff out there. My wall hasn't moved since I think 2023 when I was competing last. Like, you know what I mean? And so feed. I think the wall is the Facebook. But anyhow,
the feed and whatever. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. I know what you mean.
And he says to me, oh, you don't have to follow me back. I'm just a nobody.
You're like, everybody's a somebody.
That's what I said. I was like,
and also you're a nice enough person to talk to someone that you don't know yet and compliment them. And that makes you someone we would like to know. Thank you. Yeah. Like you're coming with us.
It was so bizarre, but it was the same thing. So then we go to the Cheesecake Factory because nothing else was kind of open around us. And so again, I order my bowl of lettuce and this young lady is serving us and she's like, you look incredible. And I was like, well, thank you very much. And And, so she brings my bowl of lettuce and she goes, I brought you a couple of different dressing options. I don't know what you can have. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. We're not going to have dressing, but
that's very kind of you. You can take them back. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah. Exactly. And so we get to talking. And one of the things that I do is I often talk to people about Unbreakable because the content that we put out on that page is quality, right? And one of the things that I think is a really value add that Josie and I really like is the Thursday AMAs. People really resonate with that. We get some really deep questions on there. And it gives people the opportunity to really speak to the things that are important to them or that are kind of eating them a little bit, or where they would just maybe like a little bit of direction or maybe a second opinion. And so this young lady, I said, yeah, if you give me a follow, I'll give you a follow back. I give her the Unbreakable. I give her the website. And she goes, oh, I'm just a nobody. You don't have to follow me back. And I'm like,
and you're like, what's with all these nobodies? This isn't real.
I couldn't believe it. I was just so shocked that, I mean, but the thing is that we are what we say we are, right? And if you are thinking that and believing that, then that's what you're telling yourself. That's what you're putting in your head every single day. It's just makes me feel kind of sad. Because, I mean, it's not like I think I'm some big somebody. I'm not. But at the same time, why wouldn't I think that about myself?
Well, I think nobody's a nobody. And on one hand, it's sad that you've had 2 encounters with people who describe themselves that way.
Yep.
But I know that that's only part of that story for both of those individuals, because both of them have now met you, and both of them have now been affirmed that actually that's not the framing at all. And you know, you're a fairly compelling individual in my experience. And so I think that you will have made a difference for those people and hopefully help them to understand that's not how you see them. And that's not how they should see themselves. You know, everyone is a somebody. Everyone is intrinsically valuable and significant. And when we treat people like that, like as though that were the case, it becomes true for them too. It can become true for them too. And so I think, you know, continuing to recognize people, you know, however they show up, wherever the so-called chance encounters we have with them are, I mean, it's all significant. It all matters.
I agree. So let's shift gears a little bit. You know, I mean, one of the things that I found to be very compelling about you is the work that you did in order to win.
Was it my mug? Is it my mug?
It was your
though?
mug. Yeah, those are
How
very
good is this?
supportive.
Sorry.
It's fabulous.
Anyway, sorry.
This is why we hang out. Squirrel. So talk to me a little bit about your Nobel Peace Prize. You know, let's talk a little bit about that, because clearly if you're out there winning, you know, these kinds of prizes or being acknowledged, recognized, and given the opportunity to fall into a group of people like that, there is something that moved you. And there was a platform for something that was really, really important to you.
Well, I'm really glad that you asked about that, particularly today. So as we're recording this here in Australia and in Japan, it is Hiroshima Day, the 6th of August. And so 80 years ago today, the first atomic bomb was dropped on a civilian population in an act of war by the US government. And 3 days later, the second one on the city of Nagasaki. And last month, we commemorated the first nuclear weapons test, the Trinity, in the desert in the United States. And when I think about what has drawn me into the work, which has resulted in the Nobel Peace Prize, it's all about the voices of the survivors and the narratives of those who suffered, and including those who died from the use of those nuclear weapons. So when I was in medical school, I started medical school a little older than some people. I was 26, and I'd done a few things already. And I felt a little kind of out of sorts in med school, because I had decided I wanted to go to med school so that I could change the world, you know, so that I could have an increased platform for advocacy, so that I could you know, help people in a really physical manner. I had like big dreams, big goals, big plans. And I found myself surrounded by, I mean, not exclusively, but the vibe for the most part at medical school was people who were looking to be, you know, members of the, like, you know, upper middle class, basically. People who wanted to have, you know, a really nice house and, you know, various, you know, nice vehicles, or, you know, stuff, things, material things. And none of that kind of had much appeal for me. And I couldn't really see that that was like worth going to med school for. And so I was a little bit lost. I was like, where are my people? And the good news is I found them. I found a group which in Australia is called the Medical Association for the Prevention of War. And they actually gave me funding to go to the Congress of like what is the like big international federation for all these like peace-loving doctors, which is called the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, IPPNW. And IPPNW was having a congress that year in Beijing, in China. And so I actually got funding. Like they just wrote me a check to go buy a plane ticket, and I got to go to Beijing for like 5 days for this big congress. And I met doctors and medical students from all over the world who cared about the planet. A lot of them had been involved in things like the campaign to ban landmines. They'd been involved in work on small arms and light weapons, particularly in Africa and elsewhere. And a lot of them had had a long career of doing everything they could to shift the dial on nuclear weapons and to help reframe nuclear weapons as, instead of being something that's a military and strategic thing, a public health issue. This is a challenge to human health. And so as doctors, we have to speak up about this. And we need to come up with a way of having healthy public policy which gets rid of nuclear weapons. And so that's really sparked something within me. And I was like, these are my people. And so at that meeting in Beijing, I actually heard the stories of some hibakusha survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was just amazing for me. It was, finding out what it was really like for them on the ground, what it was really like for them learning what impact happened to their physical bodies, to their families and friends, like the people who died. In many cases, you're talking to someone who was a school child who, everybody in their class died except them. Like they managed to get out of a burning building, like that kind of absolutely, gut-wrenching narrative. And then you find out about things like the stigma of having been a survivor. Like for many women, it was assumed that it would be infertile, so that they had a hard time getting married, like connecting. So like the impact, psychological, social, spiritual, and then all of the like immediate, but then also all the delayed health problems with various cancers that crop up, like, and even in the second and third generation. And so now, 80 years on, we have those first generation survivors, those hibakusha, which is the Japanese word given to the survivors. Obviously, there aren't that many of them still alive. The only ones who are alive were children, really young children, when all of this occurred. And so what we wanted to do in IPPNW is kind of renew the focus of the world on nuclear weapons and on the need to get rid of them. And so in my medical school years, what came about was that we in MAPW started a campaign called the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN. And that was launched formally in 2007. And that was launched in Melbourne and then in Vienna. And it turned into what we had always hoped it would be, which is an international campaign with now involvement of organizations in over 100 countries, over 500 different partner organizations. And it's everything from like unions to church groups, to school groups, educational organizations. We've had collaborations with the International Committee of the Red Cross. We've had just such a breadth of humanity saying, no, this is an issue that we also believe in. A lot of leadership at like a municipal level, like mayors and cities declaring themselves like nuclear weapons free zones, and countries that have become real champions for this. And early champions included, the late Pope Francis, who was very clear on nuclear weapons. And,
yes.
We've had leadership from such a number of different fronts on this issue. And as ICAN developed, one of the principles we had was that we really wanted to ground the voices of the survivors and center those. And so in 2017, we were the main civil society partners for negotiations at the United Nations for a treaty that prohibits nuclear weapons. Because up till that point, there was kind of like this legal gap where actually nuclear weapons, which are the worst weapons of mass destruction, weren't illegal in international law. So there's a treaty banning chemical weapons, biological weapons. There's a landmines treaty, legislation against cluster munitions, all this other stuff, but nothing that said nuclear weapons are illegal. But this treaty does that. So that was negotiated in July of 2017. And so later that year, we as a campaign were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, because we were, the sort of the main drivers behind that significant shift. And now, like almost half the world's countries have signed the treaty.
Wow.
So there's a long way to go, but it has made a difference in stigmatizing nuclear weapons. And it's also made it so that in some countries, it's made it basically illegal to be invested in nuclear weapons. So it's helped put pressure to divest from nuclear weapons companies, and we've done work to find out, okay, where's your bank invested? Where are your various investments? What are they funding this industry? And one of the super embarrassing things that came up at the time when ICANN won the Nobel was it turned out that the Nobel Foundation had some investments in nuclear weapons companies. And so that got fixed real quick.
Wow.
But, it's if you don't look, you don't know.
No, that's right.
If you don't check where your investments are, you don't actually know what evil things you're actually helping to fund. And so there's lots of levers that having international legislation can add, can bring about. So to come to this past year in 2024, Nihon Hadankyo, which is the biggest organization of those hibakusha, of those survivors of nuclear weapons in Japan, they were awarded the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize. And so, in Oslo in December of last year, you could see these absolutely, when I say the most adorable people you've ever seen, these amazing Japanese elders showing up in Oslo, just kindly and gently and respectfully explaining to the world why 80 years is too many. We have got to get rid of nuclear weapons. We owe it to them. They've carried the burden of this, and they've carried these stories for so long, and we owe it to them. We have to listen, and we have to make a change. And ultimately, the thing that keeps me going in this work, and particularly on Hiroshima Day, I want to affirm, if we're listening to those hibakusha, we have to believe what they're telling us, which is that either we get rid of nuclear weapons or they will get rid of us. And we have to do the work.
Absolutely.
So there's a wonderful expression that one of my friends gave me recently. She's a Maori woman from New Zealand, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And she said, first we do the mahi, then we get the treats. And mahi is the te reo Maori word for work. So, and I love that framing. And I think that in the work to abolish nuclear weapons, first you do the work, and then occasionally you get a really big treat. Hi, you got a treaty. Hi, you got a Nobel Peace Prize. And we want to take that energy and reinvest it in the work, take those treats to fuel the work keeping going.
Absolutely.
And so in this season of commemoration, it's incentive. So in this season of commemoration and remembering and respecting, over the next 12, 24, 72 hours, we're going to see a lot of mealy-mouthed statements from politicians and from world leaders about nuclear weapons. And anything short of, we are committed to getting rid of them and to doing everything we can to get rid of them as fast as we possibly can, is not enough. Anything less than that is disrespectful to the survivors. And it's not just the survivors in Japan, it's also the survivors of nuclear weapons testing, which has occurred around the world. So in Australia, the British Army did nuclear weapons tests in the South Australian desert and in islands off the coast of Western Australia. They had several times the amount of explosive power of the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so much fissile material.
Wow.
Throughout the Pacific, there have been nuclear weapons tests by Americans, by the British, by the French. And there's not been accountability, reparations, acknowledgement, any of the things that would be necessary for justice in the face of that. There were significant tests in Kazakhstan by the Russians. There were numerous tests by the Americans, in the United States. There's quite a lot of dirty secrets that don't get enough airing, and we don't spend enough time listening to those survivors. So for all of those people and for all of those who've passed, we have to do the work.
Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about the sense of social justice. I think, we're both Western Canadians, and we were both raised by people who care about more than just that immediate circle. Because, there's a lot of passion behind the words and the sentiments and the work that you do, not just as an activist and a neuroscientist and neurosurgeon. But where did this come from? Because I think, you have a very, very powerful voice, right? You were just on a documentary about women in physician females and the the hard work it is to be, and the emotional labor, I think was the word that you used, the emotional labor of being a female neurosurgeon. Um, Talk a little bit about where this comes from, because I don't think that a lot of people are moved in the same way that you are to have the same level of passion, care, or even compassion that you carry in this body of yours.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways of, I don't know, explaining or understanding like what's the making of an activist, or, you know, a campaigner, a, you know, a rat bag who gets things done. I think one kind of framing is that, you know, you mentioned like we were both raised by people who had a bigger framework and a greater concern for the world and for our neighbors. And I think an anecdote which perhaps kind of sums it up really well is that when I was born, my mother, the wonderful Alice Mitchell, prayed that I wouldn't be wishy-washy. And so, you know, the intention and the prayer was there right from the beginning, that that I would not be someone who would be, you know, blown around by the wind or knocked over by the waves, that I wouldn't be wishy-washy. And I wasn't very old. I was probably like in, you know, the like elementary school age when one of our family friends, and I was born and raised in Peru. And so another family who were from the UK, I was very close friends with their kids, and Auntie Lynn said to Mum, "Alice, I don't think you should have prayed that." You know, but even through the tumultuous, argumentative years, you know, probably exacerbated in the teenage season, but, you know, kind of a permanent fixture, being strong-willed and, you know, very full of opinions. Even in the most strident seasons of my life, I don't think either of my parents truly regretted having set that intention for my life and having given me that blessing. I'd have to ask them if they feel differently about that. But I think that, you know, this comes from somewhere. And so it wasn't just that moment of that prayer, but it was being raised in a way that engaged me in thinking critically. And also the modeling that they had of doing things that were sacrificial and community minded and not being selfish and not being small minded. When you're raised by people who are trying to be strategic and significant for the greater good, it has an impact. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, all I can hope is that I've made them proud in some small way.
Oh, I'm certainly sure you have. It's interesting because we were raised very much the same way, but I think for us it came from a place of, you know, my father was in the Department of Justice for 25 years, and I think my very first political rally was when I was 6 years old. And I write about this actually in Unbreakable, of, you know, public service was something that we always did. And I think a lot of it was because we didn't have a lot of money, and so giving back and volunteering was a way for us to know that we were giving something for the things that we were receiving. And, you know, I often say to people, you know, volunteerism and social activism is probably better than any education you could possibly get, because you're staring in the whites of people's eyes as you're doing things to make their lives better, right? And it could be something as simple as going out and, you know, volunteering at a soup kitchen, or, you know, my dad used to load 5 of us or 6 of us up into his camper and drop us off at the senior citizens home, and he'd be like, "Okay, see you in 5 hours," and off he would go, right? And I mean, I talk about that a lot because it was a really, really profound part of my youth and my childhood. We were part of the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, right? We didn't have a mother to raise us, and so we had volunteers who chose to say, "I will teach you the song of being a female."
Mm.
Debatable. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was about having somebody who could lean in and give us something that nobody else really could. And so it becomes this cycle of opportunity where being a good person just begets you to be receiving good things, and it just continues on, right?
And it's about being present, right? Like, you know, you think about all the volunteers showing up, and sometimes people show up and they do more harm than good. And sometimes they show up and it's not quite the right thing, or right. You know, the intentions might be fantastic, but it might not be culturally safe or whatever, right? But I think that this is where I feel it's so important. Like, being present is the goal. It's not being perfect, it's being present. Like, it's about
Correct.
showing up. And I think about how we model this for those around us and how we model this for the next generation. And I have 4 nibblings. And when I think about my nibblings, I think about, I don't want them to think that, any of their parents or their aunties or uncles or anything are perfect. I want them to notice that we show up and we give it a go, and that we are in the mix, and that we learn from what we're seeing and what we're doing, and learning from anything that we realize, well-intended might have caused harm, all of that stuff. I think it's about iterating an intentional life,
That's it.
of being present in community, and
Yes.
being a part of it, and not seeing yourself as separate from it.
And
And
it's
that's,
intent, right? It's
yeah,
intent. It's always about intent. What are you intending to go out and do? And what are you intending to go out and deliver?
yeah,
My little
yeah.
Ruth, one of the things that she used to, I mean, Ruth she's a December baby. And so December is
The
a
best
very,
people are, by the way. It's a
yes.
very
So,
good year. It was a very good month.
and, so
Just
this little
saying.
chicken, she would have her birthday on the 7th. And then she has Christmas, and she would receive a lot of gifts in both of those times. And so I would say to her, unfortunately, until you decide to pick up some of your toys or clean up some, you've got to donate some. Like, you can't just constantly have this constant influx of stuff. You're
We're
one
not just going to
child.
pile up,
No,
the mountain higher and higher.
no. And
We need
so
we need to think about other people as well.
That's exactly it. And so we had a number of different things that we would do. And it was my way of showing her. And I mean, I started with her when she was 2, and like 2.5, almost 3 years old, where we would bake cookies for the outreach van, which was a safe injection use van, which my father had very strong opinions about. And that was fine. Well, you're a single mother. You can't be giving your money away. These people are addicts. Well, you know what? Addicts need to eat too. And he understood
They
that.
also they
And
also are people. Yeah.
exactly. And he respected that, and he valued that. But it was, for this little one, what she would do is we would make little Easter gift baskets or little baggies every Easter and every Christmas, and we would take them to the women's shelter. And it was so that these children who had to flee violence had the opportunity to receive something that normally they wouldn't. And so that was something she looked forward to on an annual, basis. And so then it became a thing where when she would get all of these toys, she would say, well, I don't want to throw any of my stuff away. She said, I think we should take some of that to the women's shelter. And so she would bag up her birthday gifts, and she would take them to the women's shelter and give them over to these kids to either keep or to have at the shelter, so that
Nice.
they had something to do. And, it's just, they're very, very small things, but those are the foundational things that I think we're lacking in our society right now. We're not expecting our children to give as much as I think we were asked in, the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s. It's more than just an act of a corporate giving day, right? And I'm not bashing a corporate giving day, but social activism and social justice and giving and those types of things should be more than just your ESG strategy.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing for people who are, whose moral development is in active progress, which is, hopefully all of us, but particularly children and young
Mm-hmm.
people, there's the important dynamic about showing up to, like, a safe injecting site, a soup kitchen, a women's shelter, is that it lets you do more than just be like, aren't I a good person? I gave some of my Christmas presents away. It allows you to do the logical thing that a smart person will do, which is to make the observation that the system is broken, and that the
Yes.
world is not equitable at the moment. And so it allows, I mean, if you actually take children into these settings and listen to them and don't edit them and don't shut them down, what they say is, this isn't fair. And they, the natural repercussions of making the obvious observations about the world we live in is that this is not just. And so, I mean, I feel like the natural set of conclusions you come to, you start to sound a bit like a socialist. And I think that's okay. I think that's legit. And so I think we want people of all ages interrogating, why is it that we've got, squillionaires paying no taxes, and we've got, a rising cost of living, some of which is just not necessary. It doesn't actually have to be like this. Like, it does not
No.
have to be the way that it is. And we can have a better system and we can have a better world. And the one we really want to work towards is one where there's no need for women's shelters and no need for soup kitchens.
Bingo.
That's where we want to arrive. And so by letting children be part of the work of like handing out pancakes or bagging up sweets or presents for kids who just don't have the same experience of Santa Claus, we allow them to enter into the suffering of the world and to partner with an ailing, hurting world in a way that means they can be strategic and significant with their futures and with their present about how they want to shift the dial and how they want to make a difference. And so, the worst thing we can do is to limit or edit kids who are making the very appropriate conclusion that this is broken. Let's find ways to give them the freedom to do everything they can think of and to help teach us to revisit our humanity and reconnect with that sense of, yeah, you know what? It is completely unfair. This is not okay. And it keeps us from falling into that lie that like, I've earned this or I deserve any of the things I have.
Yeah.
It is, you and I've been incredibly fortunate. We've been very hardworking and we've been very strategic. But, people go, oh, you made great choices. It's like, well, we had good choices to make. We were given good options. There were, on the buffet of life, on that table of things we could just manage to reach, included some great things. Those things are fundamentally out of reach for some people. And we all have work to do to make that not the case.
They are. And I think it also starts in the conversations that we choose to have. And it particularly with our young people, one of the things that I note is a lot of people have conflict with their children when they start to talk about politics or what's important to their children. And our younger generations do not have the same belief systems or the same ideals in a lot of ways. And I value that so much. Like, I don't expect that my daughter and I will always align on every political or social or economic conversation, because we will not. And what we have decided in our home is that each one of us has the right to be heard and to be respected for what it is that we believe and what we stand for. And it is not my place to tell her how to vote. It is not my place to tell her how to think. It is my place to teach her how to be a critical thinker, to make good decisions, to review and read information and make decisions that suit her best interest. That is how we grow and move people forward. And, there was a time when she was, I would say she was probably 17, 18 years old. And, we would debate and I would say to her, you and I have the right to be separate in our thought processes. You don't get the right to disrespect me because of the way that I think or the things that I believe, because where I am in my life is very different than where you are in your life. Right. And that, but that's how we create change. And I actually talk about this quite a bit, about how the globe is shaped by what we choose to do and how we choose to behave around our kitchen table.
And how we, yeah, absolutely. It all starts at home. Every little shred of it starts at home. And having disagreements in a way where, you can have the full courage of your convictions and have a complete difference of opinion from the people you share a home with and share your life with, and still be respectful.
Yes.
And when you have new information, you critically appraise it and you figure out what it looks like to be critical about new information and to, not just be like, well, I'm from this team, so we think this, and I think it's good for us. It's good for each other. And having new discussions means that our windows of possibility are always expanding instead of shrinking down. And I think, when I think about the future, collectively, but also just, on a personal level, what does the future look like for me? I would hope that I would continue to surround myself by people who challenge me and who get me to think differently about things that arise and about new issues, so that I don't turn into what you worry about is becoming someone who's like, well, in my day, and kind of getting rigid, may the mind always be open, but not so open the brain falls out, right? That's the setting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not about being right versus wrong. It's about, and this is what I struggle with when I'm coaching young people and when I'm hiring and sourcing young people and when I'm managing change with different demographics. I mean, this is one of the things that my clients are complaining about the most right now. We have more generations in our workforce right now than we have ever had. Right now, we have
Yeah,
between 5 or 6 generations. I mean, we
Yeah,
have
wow.
boomers who are still there. We have Gen Jones, which is there. We have Gen X, which is still there. We have Zillennial, we have Millennial, we have Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha is jumping in. That's 7 generations that all see and
Wow.
think and perceive the world differently. And so this is where something as simple as emotional regulation and the capability to sit and listen without being triggered comes into effect.
And so there's like these, 9 squillion different generations, but there's also so many other overlays that are like, we've really never
Absolutely.
had more diverse workforces. We have,
No.
thank goodness, we both live in places which are like thoroughly multicultural. And so we have people who are coming from different countries of origin, religious framings, all kinds of different political perspectives. And then there's a whole range of how people are starting to understand and express themselves in terms of gender. And so there's never been a greater need to be able to think, across lanes and time zones in one's own brain, so that we can actually have meaningful communication with people, which is based on what someone really said and what they really mean, instead of like some template we've assigned on them as a shortcut, to try and hurry things up.
Well, not only that, but I think that, using the word template is just perfect, because I think with the oversaturation of social media and the overuse of social media, I think it is very easy to find yourself into a very simplistic niche of where you think you should fit versus I am just who I am, right? Like, what's wrong with being an eclectic individual with different opinions, different viewpoints, and
Right.
different interests? Like, what's wrong with that? Why do we have to be, this is what I am and this is who I am and that's it?
And
It's so
and like,
absolute.
getting to some place of like, ideological purity. Oh, well, we've ironed out all. I'm like, no, we should be ideologically
Stop it.
maturing and refining.
Yes.
And like, there should be movement at the station on an ongoing basis. Like, this is a moving train. This is a
Yes.
moving train. We're going on a journey. We're not settling down here. That's not what's going on,
No, absolutely not. Well, Miss Ruth, I know we are close to time here. You've given us some really wonderful things to chat about. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to follow your journey, to learn more about you, or to donate to your race cause?
So you can follow me on Instagram. That's probably the platform I use the most. And my handle there is at Dr. Ruth Mitchell, at Dr. Ruth Mitchell. I'm also on LinkedIn, very happy to connect with folks there. And in the next 24 hours or so, I'm going to put up a post about my marathon effort again. So it'll be at the top of the feed.
Perfect.
So people I'd be very grateful for any donations to the Children's Cancer Institute. I can tell you, I know they use every penny wisely. But Kait, more than anything, I just want to thank you for having me on your wonderful podcast. Having a chat with you is such a treat. I wish you were closer, and we should do this more often.
Yes, absolutely. And, our wonderful producer, Josie, has just added a reminder in the chat. If there's a deadline for donations, that would be fantastic.
Yes, so the marathon's at the end of the month on the 31st of August. And so if you can get it in by then, that would be great. That would be fantastic. So you've got all month, but get on with it now. Why not?
Yes, why not? Why not? This has been so wonderful. Ruth, this has been such a pleasure. I hope that this won't be the only time that we have you on the podcast. I'd love to have you back after your marathon to hear how it went. I want to hear about your fundraising efforts, and I want to hear about the other things that you're going to have on the go as you move into this new season, because you guys will be going into spring right away here, hey?
That's right. That's right. It's going to start warming up. I'm not going to have to wear quite as many layers on my long run, so that's going to be great.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you again for joining me. It has just been such a wonderful pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for joining us as usual. And remember, protect your peace, chase your growth, and stay unbreakable.